We're back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering all the Week 18 action for the final week of the regular season. To get straight into it, and starting out with the Panthers and the Bucs for the division title in the absolutely confusing NFC South. And it was bound to be a game of just pure chaos. I mean, it was already, within torrential downpour at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. And the field was slick as hell. There were just rough patches of mud all over the place. It was going to get pretty ugly. And it did start out that way, at least for the Panthers on their own end. Because immediately you would have Tampa Bay drive down with a good balance of some early runs from a consistent overall day in, Bucky Irving's defense, to be honest. And eventually that would open up a few good passes for them, with Baker Mayfield slicing one right in the seam to Cade Otton as he secured what would be his very first touchdown catch of the season. And how ironic is that a man who is their tight end one had to wait all the way until the final week of the regular season to get his only score of the year. That's just so fucking cruel. But it would help the Bucs go up 7-0. And at that point, you got very little resistance from the Panthers, at least early on. Like, for a time in this game, they only had ran, on their first couple drives, just to take things into perspective, 8 plays in 4 minutes, while barely being able to move the football whatsoever on their own end. And their strength is certainly, predicated on balance with, short passes for Bryce Young to exploit, and also having a solid run game between Rico O'Donnell and Chuba Hubbard. But that did not happen. Vita Vea was all over it. Hassan Reddick was certainly all over it, and they would end up getting the ball back for themselves, with the Bucs driving down yet again, having some eventful plays, including a dime down the field to Mike Evans, along with a pass interference tacked onto that. However, as they were able to get into the red zone, the Panthers, for one of their first times in this game, ended up holding, and Caleb McLaughlin would get in a 29-yard field goal to go to give them a 10-0 lead. It could have been even worse after that second drive, but Baker Mayfield decided, hey, you know what? Because one thing that had been working to, Tampa Bay's advantage at times was his ability to get outside of the pocket. There were way too many times where you had these Panther defenders out here just looking absolutely dazed and confused at Baker Mayfield getting away from them. Like, Derek Brown was okay, but even he at times, along with A'Shawn Robinson and a bunch of other guys on that front end, including Nick Scarton, man, they were getting in the area of tackling the man in the backfield, and he just would not give up on the play whatsoever. While there would be a few later that ended up working to his advantage, it's safe to say that this interception to Christian Roseboom was just incredibly ugly. And with it happening on his own side of the field, that would prove to be brutal instantly, as the Panthers would waste no time getting a touchdown pass to Tommy Tremble, essentially on just a drag route that freed him up and gave them the 10-7 deficit. Then you had a weirder sequence from the Bucs here. I will say that, again, Bucky Irving was probably their most consistent player for a little bit of time. But they were able to rely on Rachaad White out of the backfield as well when they were briefly limiting Bucky Irving's contributions, and he was able to do what he does best in the receiving game, take some pressure off, and open up other avenues of their offense. Inevitably, they got down to a different third down conversion opportunity where Baker Mayfield, again, just took it upon himself to get out of the pocket, pump fake the hell out of Nick Scarton, and get himself an 11-yard run for some reason. The Panthers would proceed to hold from there and get the ball back themselves, but ultimately, Bryce Young would not have the greatest outing himself. Now, of course, you have to understand that he was coming off of a game where he's facing off against one of the top defenses in the NFL, and was limited to just 54 passing yards. But even still, he did not find a whole lot of success, especially early on, as Jacob Parrish would intercept one of his passes to give the Bucs the ball back and lead them ultimately to a field goal drive just before the end of the half. And while the Bucs had the advantage on the field and in the scoreboard, it's safe to say that in some other ways things got really suspicious starting out in the third quarter. Because my goodness, man, there are just a number of different things that went down here. Of course, the Panthers had to help themselves amongst all of the bullshit, though. And they would start out the third quarter putting together a decent drive to at least get in Bucs territory. They got Tyrell McMillan working on Benjamin Morrison over the middle of the field for an easy catch and go for 19 yards before ultimately stalling out as a result of Levante David's contributions as a tackler. But when it came time for Ryan Fitzgerald to make a field goal, he ended up missing it from 54 yards out. And while you can understand the weather playing a factor there, this would become a theme for some of the games that I watched in terms of missed kicks. Because dear goodness, man, it's crazy. But regardless, you would have multiple punts for the teams involved here. But again, not without controversy, a little bit of controversy on the Panthers side. Because this drive was just ridiculous. I mean, like, you had something go their way earlier on as you had Levante David get called for illegal contact. Okay, fair enough. And in a game like this, you don't want the refs to decide every single aspect of it, but these things were glaring, and even the broadcast team pointed it out. You had one of the Chuba Hubbard runs take place, and essentially as the play was going down, Tommy Tremble was throwing a block, and Dennis, one of their guys defensively for Tampa Bay, he rips his helmet straight off. But there's no foul call there. Nobody's even looking at him do that. And so Tommy Tremble's like, what the fuck, man? So that happens on one of the very next plays. You have Tyrell McMillan get complete and total separation on Benjamin Morrison down the field for a massive gain that would have helped the Panthers immensely in that moment to at least get some momentum going, establish a little bit of rhythm, maybe even run some tempo and catch the defense off guard for potentially another solid play down the field. Instead, they decide for whatever reason to call one of the weakest offensive pass interference calls I've ever seen in my life. One of the weakest calls. Like, there was barely a touch on McMillan's end whatsoever. And it happened at essentially the earliest point of the route. In the same way that defenders are given a 5-yard cushion to hold and do whatever they got to do to throw a receiver off of their positioning, a wide receiver is granted and afforded the same thing, especially on what turned out to be a deeper route. If McMillan ran a slant and did that, then it's like, okay, maybe that's a little more understandable, and even then, it's probably still legal. You call that on a route where he's clearly got him beat, regardless of whether or not he did anything to him at the top of the route. And it still goes through. So it's like, at that point, where the fuck is the consistency? You're going to miss that call with Dennis literally ripping a man's helmet off, but then proceed to throw a flag on something that minor? In reality, it was just strange, man. And that would force a punt for them, unfortunately. As tough as that was, and also adding in the fact that this damn Bucs drive, with more solid running from Bucky Irving, would be aided by a weird pass interference call on Scott, despite Otten tripping over his own feet down the field. Yet again, in spite of all this shit, they still managed, once they got into that area of the field, they held strong on both Sean Tucker and Baker Mayfield to force McLaughlin to kick a field goal. But things would become even more difficult for the Panthers here, and it didn't need to. They had a solid drive. They have Rico O'Donnell hit one of his incentives, by the way, after getting this damn deep catch off the screen for a 25-yard gain. And it worked well for them. Xavier Legette was starting to get some action going as well before, for whatever reason, in the height of the rain, ground and grass obviously all out of sorts and discombobulated at that point, they decided it was a good idea to call a flea flicker in that moment, and it didn't really look like much of anything developed, but before it could even take off, Rico O'Donnell literally slipped on the ground, and it affected his ability to pitch the ball back to Bryce Young, and that resulted in a fumble. Now, I will say Bryce Young was close enough to the ball where he could have tried to get it. And while it would unfortunately end up in Levante David's hands, it's kind of like, if you're the Panthers, why go for it in that situation? You understand the weather conditions taking place out there right now. You think that was truly a good idea in that moment? You're trying to do whatever you can to keep the ball to, or at least keep yourself level on the ground as best as possible. And even in the event of a potential slip, you don't want to put the ball in harm's way either. And you managed to do both things within that single play. That would just take yet another drive away from them. So, even with the penalties in mind, it's not like the Panthers didn't have their fair share of opportunities in this game. But, oh my gosh. So the Bucs would get the ball back right there immediately. And they would put together a decent drive. They would progress all the way down into Carolina's side of the field before you would have Caleb McLaughlin, who has been reliable this season, miss from 38 yards out. And from there, the Panthers knew it was go time. Running essentially a 2-minute drill, they worked all their way down the field, this time being able to exploit Jacob Parrish down the field and have Tetairoa McMillan get over top of him for a 40-yard gain that would stand and give them a first down off of a 4th and 8. Then instantly, a couple of plays later, Jalen Coker developing as potentially a wide receiver 2 for them, and people were expecting Xavier Legette to be that. But Coker has been emerging for a little while this season, so that's interesting to see. And he would keep that going, as now working on Benjamin Morrison, he would get a little outbreaking route going. And with Morrison's hand right near the ball, Coker still found a way to make an acrobatic enough catch to pull it in and get both feet in bounds for a score to make this a 16-14 game. Now, the Panthers at that point, they got it done before the 2-minute warning, so you had a little bit of a chance, but you needed an instant stop if you wanted to maximize your opportunity to go down the field with a reasonable amount of time and score. And that would not happen for them, as all it took was a pair of runs and a 20-yard Cade Otton catch to ultimately force them to waste pretty much all of their timeouts and allow Tampa Bay to drain the clock without having to pick up another first down after that. The Panthers' efforts would prove futile on this attempt to try to work their way down the field off of laterals, because Bryce Young does not have the arm strength to get it down the field from the 21-yard line, which is why you have to give credit to the Bucs for forcing them to step out of the end zone and just go return it from there. You could question Tremaine as well. Like, at that point, man, there wasn't really much room for him to do anything, but to still attempt it and just, it wasn't worth it at that point. And with that, the Bucs would win 16-14, meaning that heading into other action later on, they would at least give themselves a fighting chance at securing the NFC South, but it would all come down to the damn Falcons and the Saints. And we'll get to that in time. But as for the numbers pertaining to this game, Baker Mayfield had 203 passing yards along with a touchdown and an interception on 72.7% completion. Bucky Irving had 85 rushing yards, and Cade Otton added 7 receptions for 94 yards and a touchdown. One of the better days he's had all year. As for the Panthers, Bryce Young had 266 passing yards on 68.6% completion, along with 2 touchdowns and an interception. But the real story for them was in the run game. You know, the Bucs had 140 yards, even if they averaged just 3.3 yards per carry. The Panthers had to abandon that, which is never really a recipe for success for them. They combined for 19 yards on 1.4 yards per carry in just 14 attempts. Definitely not something you would expect one of the top rushing attacks in the NFL to face when they needed it the most. But again, that front seven, like they had been doing for a while this season before they just hit this rut in Tampa Bay. Up front, for a few weeks in a row, they were one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL, limiting all the damn great running backs in the league today to career low or season low outings in some regards. So I guess at the right time they were able to find a semblance of that again. But would it prove to be enough for them to win the NFC South? That would remain to be seen. Tyrod McMillan had 4 receptions for 85 yards. Jalen Coker had 6 receptions for 47 yards and a touchdown. And Tommy Tremble had 3 receptions for 38 yards and a touchdown. Derek Brown in this game also had 13 tackles and 5 solo as well. Quick note, Tyrod McMillan, with his incredible rookie season this year, even with the start that his counterpart in Emeka Egbuka had to the beginning of the season as well, McMillan would set history on his front, becoming the second rookie in Panthers history to post 1,000 yards or greater as a wide receiver. Now, the name Kelvin Benjamin being brought up with his big Popeye's biscuit eating ass. Just ask Cam Newton about it. He had to deal with that for ages. And it got to a point where he couldn't take that shit anymore. You don't want to be up there with that kind of player. But at the same time, Kelvin Benjamin was the only other Panthers player to do it at that time. So, I mean, hey, McMillan is already working to become way greater of a player than he was. That's a good sign for them, at least. But moving on to this game. The big daddy of games here for this particular week. The number 1 seed in the NFC West on the line between the Seahawks and the 49ers. And let's just say that I am definitely glad to see that Seattle handled business. But looking into the flow of the game in and of itself, there were a number of different things on the line, those aforementioned things as well. But also, looking at a graphic here, they mentioned that Mike McDonald's road record through his first 2 seasons as a head coach actually rivaled those of George Seifert, Sean McVay, and also a former Rams head coach in the St. Louis days in, I think, Rick Martz. So if he did end this game with a win or a loss, he'd still be up there for at least the tied for second best or the second best record on the road in the first 2 seasons as a head coach in NFL history. So, I mean, hey, the Seahawks, even with a need to secure the 1 seed, even if they wanted to do it, could they really be all that phased by having to go on the road for the playoffs? One could really ask themselves that question and just ponder on that for a second. The 49ers as well, they also understood that they definitely wanted their own shot at it too. There have been reports circulating about Fred Warner potentially getting healthy for the playoffs if they endured a long enough playoff run. So you'd want to have him healthy at that point. And you also just have the idea of having so many other people at this point be injured and everything like that knowing that you're about to have to embark on a pretty short trip if you do lose this game in San Francisco's view. It would be a luxury to at least have a bye, try to get these bodies healthier, because the players that are playing for them, when you look at George Kittle, when you look at Christian McCaffrey, even those guys exited last week's Bears game with being a little banged up. And on short notice, they had to turn around and recoup themselves. So it would help them immensely if they had the bye. Let's just say that early on, man, against a much maligned defense, obviously losing star players, but with the game against the Bears last week, not really proving to be all that dominant on their front. They instantly lost this game in the trenches, man. Instantly. Gray Zebel continues to do what he does when it came to the damn pancake blocks and perimeter blocking. And you love to see it from a man who has played in every single game as a rookie for this team this season. You absolutely love to see it. And again, smash fucking hit when it came to that selection right there, as Kenneth Walker would take one of his blocks and work himself down the field on essentially a screen route for a 20-yard gain to start out this drive. They kept on balancing it out with a lot of shorter passes, but also a heavy amount of runs to keep the defense on their toes. And Diamado Alenwa, who had been talking shit to Jackson Smith and Jigba before the game, would be targeted instantly on the drive. And he held like shit. But he wanted him. But you're grabbing him, doing all the things you know you can't be doing as a cornerback to a wide receiver in that moment. Interesting from my perspective. Then you get down in essentially go-to-go territory where Charbonnet has been money for most of the season. And they decided to have essentially a sprint route to the outside. Darnold had the opportunity to throw it to Charbonnet in that moment, but Bethune would capitalize on, I guess, some form of hesitancy from him, and he got sacked, which I didn't really understand. You could have ran the ball in that situation, but okay, whatever, fine. They get some of those yardage. They get some of those yards back on a pair of Charbonnet runs before ultimately settling for fourth down, where they had usually been conservative all season long, coming to the down. But I guess with the stakes that were on the line in this game, they decided to go approach this a little differently. They would go for a throw, and Darnold would miss Cooper Kupp. Now, there was a little bit of supposed controversy with this. It did look like Cooper Kupp was interfered with for a split second or so, but they did not call it, and thus, despite the 49ers not being a particularly great defense, they were able to get themselves off of the field on this drive. As for Seattle, they gave up, a sack for San Francisco that would be up only their 19th on the year, which is 7 fewer than all other NFL teams. And they themselves had their longest drive in terms of time of possession without points since 2018 at pretty much 7 minutes and 37 seconds. So that was incredibly unfortunate. But, hey, this damn defense, need I say more about this defense? Why bother going drive to drive when I can just tell you, in short, that every single defender on this side of the football had an impact in this game, to the point where for majority of the first half and pretty much the game, the 49ers were radio silent. A team that had punted only twice in the month of December. A team that put up 42 points against the vaunted Bears unit just last week was struggling mightily to crack the damn code. And at times in the first game especially, they kept referencing that dynamic shift between the season opener and the season-ending game between the two squads. The 49ers were having their way earlier on in the first game when it came to being able to get the ball down the field and, coming up short more often than not, but controlling the clock, getting down, and gaining an ultimate advantage throughout the rest of the game. While the Seahawks were the ones having to battle back the entire time and make a way. No, this was the complete and total reverse. Like, at every level, you look at the front lines, and they were able to get after Brock Purdy relentlessly. Yes, having Trent Williams to blindside block for you is going to help immensely, and that loss would be proven as grand for them. But you still, between Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy II, and Jaron Reed, along with Uchenna Nwosu, along with Derek Hall, they just got after his ass relentlessly. And they would force a pair of punts and 3 and outs specifically. Also, Christian McCaffrey, as a decoy route, would be limited at several points, specifically by the likes of Amon Worry and McCaffrey. Amon Worry, who would handle him, and George Kittle at multiple points in this game. As the versatile weapon on the defensive side of the ball that he is. That pick was also fucking tremendous. And you know what the linebackers are going to do. Drake Thomas, we'll get to Drake Thomas a little later on. Ernest Jones IV, of course, being the quarterback of the defense in a way, and Julian Love as well. Glad to have him back. You combine all those different efforts, along with Tariq Woolen, making some fucking progress, man. You know how many times I had to hear earlier in the season that this nigga was getting traded and that he was not playing disciplined enough football to warrant him still being on the football team. Well, look at him now. Man was making some absolutely sound tackles in space, which has been a struggle for him since he's entered the NFL. And at those points, when you see that kind of effort on the defensive side of the ball, along with the scheme that they were running, man, it was beautiful to watch. But even with all that going down, this was still for a while a 7-0 and then 10-0 ball game. Because for all of the work that the Seahawks were able to do on the ground, they did have a long rushing score off of the first punt from Zach Charbonnet from 27 yards out after a great Rashid Shaheed return. That would be the only touchdown scored in this game. They were continuously driving down the field. They got the plays they wanted. They got Jackson Smith and Jigba fed over the middle with multiple points. But they were not able to convert in the red zone enough. And they actually had Jason Myers miss a few kicks, weirdly enough. So again, it was not the worst possible thing in the world for the 49ers. They were making things happen. Even to where when considering this field goal drive right here that they would score on, the go route to Jackson Smith and Jigba was looking solid for a second up until Jair Brown promptly helped out Renardo Green with the safety help and forced a tough incompletion. So the 49ers, despite all that, they were in the fight. It was not over. We've seen a lot of craziness this year. But Amon Worry, again, first damn play, gets George Kittle right in the fucking backfield and lays him out for a 6-yard loss. At a point, in fact, like George Kittle was starting to get some more catches, but he had 0 net yards. So it's like, if you can limit a guy who is known for getting yardage after the catch to absolutely nothing, bro, that's excellent work. And it just continued from there. While the 49ers would be able to get something out of this, man, they could not find the plays they were truly looking for. They were able to get Christian McCaffrey going at a few points, but still, Amon Worry and Ernest Jones IV were all over it with their own dose of hits. And Uchenna Nwosu was able to break pressure here. Brock Purdy trying his best to scramble out and use the dual threat ability that he does possess, he was sacked for no gain. Ultimately, they would be forced to settle for a field goal and make this 10-3, which would be the score at the half. Nothing really gave for either side. Absolutely nothing. Like, you got a few things here, and for some context, the 49ers, again, as a defense, they weren't letting much slide, but when it came to their rushing defense, 115 yards on the ground was the most they had allowed in the first half all season. While Mike McDonald entered this second half with a 13-1 record when scoring first. So, with the 49ers starting out with the drop, they'd want to at least establish something. You could double dip in theory if you run your offense accordingly. And they would try. But it did not help that Brian Robinson Jr. on the kickoff would muff the damn kick and force them into their own side of the end zone, pretty much far deeper on that end than they were expecting. At that point, they would pick up a first down. It looked as though they were starting to get their run game going with Christian McCaffrey, and it worked into them ultimately being able to stretch it out to DeMarcus Robinson with Josh Jobe covering him, and that's a mismatch in terms of physicality. DeMarcus Robinson's about like 6'3". So that was a good sign for them going into this. But yet again, when push came to shove, when they got another one to go, the defense was right on their asses again. It was Jaron Reed rubbing his damn belly, stuffing Brock Purdy in the backfield, and you also had Nick Amawari get all over a pass intended for Kendrick Bourne initially to force yet another punt. With the Hawks offensively, with them occasionally, the 49ers on their end, being able to force the issue. Lenoir, for all the shit talk that he had to JSN, he did have a few good plays in this game, including this one. And I mean, Joe Buck was saying it, well, Troy Aikman was saying it as well, that when you recognize where Zach Charbonnet came from, his time at Michigan, his time at UCLA, that man is a full-fledged power back, and he's going to run through niggas relentlessly. Yet Lenoir, surprisingly, got a great form tackle on him, lit him up in the backfield, and slammed him right down for a 5-yard loss. That could have sparked some life in him right there. But that would not be proven to be the case, as Devin Witherspoon would do a similar thing on the third down that the 49ers would face, with DeMarcus Robinson getting up for a catch that initially was beyond the line of scrimmage, but his momentum carried him backwards, and Devin Witherspoon had to drive home that emphasis even further to keep him short and force him to punt yet again. Now, I was thinking that this could have been the drive for the Seahawks going into it, to where, hey, if you get a touchdown out of it, you have a chance to put the game away entirely. It's literally as if the 49ers offense is just been weakened to this point. They haven't done anything. Completely submissive at this point of time. You controlled the flow of the game, so it was in your hands. Little did I know that the Seahawks would be lucky to get out of their own side of the field unscathed. You can't have a trip over your own lineman. That is tough. That can't always be controlled, but Sam Darnold would lose the ball in this situation. And it almost got into the hands of the 49er defense. And with the work that had been done to this point, that could have been brutal. Luckily, Zach Charbonnet would recover it. And once they got a different pressure on Sam Darnold to force an errant throw on Bethune's end, it was looking great for them, truly. The only thing with that is Bethune would have himself just some unfortunate situations to deal with, but that can be addressed later on. When it came to this third down, though, oh yeah, it's been something about these third down runs for the Seahawks with Kenneth Walker III. Because it seems like every time it happens, somehow, some way, they pick up the first down regardless. Like it's 3rd and 17 on their own side of the field. We got to stop in the bag. Nah, not with Kenneth Walker III doing what he does best in space and making people fucking miss. Long pitch play, no problem for Walker III to find all the different holes to exploit and knife through the defense for a 19-yard gain that had John Lynch rage quitting in the fucking sweep. It was that bad. And at that point, you kind of figured that could have been a momentum shift. Maybe the John Lynch reaction to things was a direct result of that knowledge. And they instantly started getting it going. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a hell of an adjustment to a Darnold throw over the middle for a 19-yard gain. And Zach Charbonnet would pick up a different first down to keep chewing down the clock. But when they got in the red zone, they were forced to settle for a field goal again, making this a 13-3 ball game. And then you had the 49ers charge back. As much as I can say, hey, fuck the 49ers. Fuck the 49ers. Fuck all that bang, bang, Niner gang shit. In reality, this would prove to be their most promising drive of the night. Instantly. They had the passing game rolling. Jennings got fed, Robinson got fed, and George Kittle got his best gain of the night. They were instantly in Seattle's red zone. Instantly in a goal-to-go situation where if they go and get a touchdown, this is only a one-possession ball game. Early in the fourth quarter, we could put a little more pressure on that offense. With the home crowd getting behind the defensive effort, a number of things can happen here if we come away with something, especially with a touchdown. And with Boye Mafe making this play, man, neither thing would happen. Now, people are saying that this is an accurate throw, from Brock Purdy on a pass that would be intercepted with having it literally fall into Drake Thomas's hands for the change of possession. Proven to be absolutely clutch in that moment, considering what the Seahawks would do next. But in reality, Mafe, even if it was a slight hit on the ball, he got a piece of it. He had his arm out like this, and the ball traveled right through a piece of his finger. It did enough to alter the trajectory of the throw, and it forced Christian McCaffrey to make an awkward adjustment to the ball as it was not coming to him on time in that moment. That's what affected the pass, not Brock Purdy himself. The throw was probably solid. Just Mafe, with his athleticism up front, definitely put a stop to all that shit. And from there, this was all Seahawks. This damn drive right here, this 16-play, 89-yard, 8-minute drive reminded me exactly of what Ohio State did on that drive against Michigan that lasted 12 minutes long. They were pounding the fucking rock and taking off as much time as they possibly could while constantly getting ahead of the sticks. They were bullying. It was bullying. It was fucking bullying. The 49ers had no way of establishing control in the situation. It just kept on going and going. And they were literally, aside from a slight and ever so slight scare with Sam Darnold overthrowing Jackson Smith and Jigba, and it nearly led to an interception, only he was out of bounds, thankfully. But after all of that, man, it felt like the life of that fan base was being drained out of them at that moment. And they were forced to use all their timeouts rather early. But even with them getting into goal-to-go territory, man, I was thinking, hey, now you're at 4th and 1 on their 3-yard line, man. Hey, run up the fucking score. Do what you got to do. You have the opportunity to do whatever you want in this situation. They would decide to go for the field goal. And Jason Myers missed again, weirdly enough. But still, in that moment, the drive did what it needed to. By that point, the 49ers had absolutely no opportunity to do much of anything, and it would remain as such, with the lockdown defense once more forcing them into a turnover on downs that could have been nearly costly to San Francisco, as Brock Purdy had both a bloodied finger and also got crunched by Derek Hall in that convergence on the front line. It took him a little bit to get up, and he would end up being okay, but that is probably a situation that is going to be monitored as the days go on before the 49ers play. But hey, with that, the Seahawks would win 13-3 to secure the NFC West, to secure the number 1 seed in the motherfucking NFC, and to secure their most wins in their team history. And there would be a lot of different things to take into account, considering how this game ended up going. For the numbers and some significance here, Sam Darnold would have 198 passing yards on 76.9% completion. They didn't really need to have him do anything over the top because, the balance of the offense, the rushing dominance, the defense spoke for itself at that point. But Darnold still had a couple things go his way. In fact, with the numbers that he put up between him getting over 100 QBR and between him also reaching the 4,000 passing yard milestone, Darnold would actually get himself $1 million in incentives with it, and would also finish as a quarterback who became the 5th to win more than 13 games in 2 straight seasons, the 2nd along with Brady to win more than 14 with the same team, with different teams. Well, not with different teams. Brady did it in back-to-back years with the Patriots, but consecutively, and also became the 5th quarterback all-time with at least 14 wins in multiple seasons. So there you go when considering that. Also, he became the 3rd in Seahawks history with at least 4,000 passing yards in 25 passing touchdowns, along with Geno Smith and Russell Wilson, of course. As for Kenneth Walker III, he had a total of 20 touches and 133 yards to lead a rushing attack that had 180 yards on the ground combined on 4.6 yards per carry and a touchdown from Zach Charbonnet. I'm telling you, man, over the past few weeks, something's been turning there to where they've been able to find their stride in the running game. And that's a promising thing to see. And they got Tom to add on to it even further. Game plan for it, scheme it however they want to, because they're chilling for the next couple of weeks without having to really travel and do much of anything relating to that at all. Jackson Smith and Jigba in this game had 6 receptions for 84 yards as well. And man, the defense, bro, it speaks for itself, bro. It needs no introduction. As for the 49ers, Brock Purdy had 127 yards passing an interception on 70.4% completion. To think that they had put up that shit ton of passing yards and overall yardage in the game against the Bears. And again, radio silent for most of the game. They combined to have less than 200 total yards, as they only ran for 53 combined. Christian McCaffrey, all around, had a struggle bus in terms of rushing with just 8 for 23 yards. And granted, it was a similar way in the first one, but there was no space for him to run the football in this game. Absolutely none. Brock Purdy was their best bet. And even he, after, getting a couple of scrambles here and there, still had enough bodies watching him to limit any of that progress. Jaywan Jennings had 4 receptions for 35 yards, and Christian McCaffrey had 6 receptions for 34 yards. George Kittle would also have 5 receptions for 29 yards. As for Tatum Bethune, though, after he had a game in which he had a tackle, a sack, a tackle for loss, and a pass deflection, he would go down at multiple points with an injury. He would return on one occasion, and then was taken off of the field yet again. It was detailed by Shanahan, per Adam Schefter, though, that Bethune is going to miss the rest of the season with a groin injury. And on a defense that is already depleted of assets and actively awaiting to see if a different one can come through, man, it's like they lose yet another one of their weapons. A guy in Bethune who had honestly become one of their better players in this absence. When they're emerging players in this absence. So that's incredibly unfortunate to see. But hey, man, the 49ers as well, to take things into account, would also decrease to 1-39 overall when trailing by more than 7 points in the fourth quarter under Kyle Shanahan specifically. Damn. That is crazy. But the damn Seahawks, man, what a fucking season. What a way to end it off and secure home field advantage for the fucking playoffs. The Super Bowl, even though not a lot of people may have wanted to believe it, at the start of the year, the Super Bowl is running through Seattle. Let's fucking go. Moving on to Colts versus Texans to start out the Sunday action. And with this, the Texans were still going to play a core amount of their guys, as many as they could, who were not injured at this point, as they were still fighting for the AFC South title. They still had a chance to win it, depending on the result of the ongoing game between the Jaguars and the Titans. And we can all imagine how that ended up going, but still, they had no way of recognizing this in real time. You gotta take care of what's out there in front of you. And they would get to that early. Bruh, Dalton Schultz was pulling out some crazy shit, dog. I saw this man make extra moves out in space and then get a fucking one-handed snag to go to pick up a massive third down and instantly get in Indianapolis territory. Was not expecting that to start out the game. But the attrition in the backfield for the Texans when it came to their running backs would definitely eat away at them a little bit. Like, Woody Marks has been okay. Jawar Jordan obviously had that good start. British Brooks has been okay, but man, they are clearly not world beaters, and the Colts would remind them of that at multiple points of time. Ultimately forcing a field goal from very deep for Kaimi Fairbairn, but he would get this 51-yarder to goal and give them a 3-0 lead to start out. This game would quickly become marked by the debut of Riley Leonard, however, when it came to the Colts side of things. Because, goodness gracious, the first fucking drop back this nigga had. Now, yes, Traymon Smith did not help himself out by allowing Alec Pierce to just run right by him as he froze for a couple seconds of time. But Riley Leonard uncorked that motherfucker all the way down the field, and he hit Alec Pierce on a 66-yard touchdown to give them the 7-3 lead right back. Parents, family in attendance, everybody's all happy about it. And man, for the most part, he pitched a great game. He kept it going. Like, Texans, man, had to find a way to respond if this was going to keep going on. But once more, they would be forced to settle with Kaimi Fairbairn hitting a 48-yarder. There would be a few rough patches for Riley Leonard at points, but things would get a little ballsy for the Colts instantly as they decided to have Rigoberto Sanchez on a fourth down at this time, fake a punt, throw a pass to Mo Alley Cox, and just pick up 16 yards like that. Breathe new life into that possession and ultimately allow them to work their way down the field a little bit more before Blake Grupe kicked the 50-yard field goal to make this a 10-6 ball game near the end of the first quarter. But all it took for the Texans was to make him a little bit uncomfortable at points and establish some more control on the offensive end, and they were able to space things out a little bit. Finally, we saw Cade Stover get a reception with this damn team, but it would be C.J. Stroud with the help of Xavier Hutchinson and Jaden Higgins to ultimately get them back on the board, as Higgins would catch an 11-yard touchdown to give them a 13-10 lead. Instantly, they pounced on an opportunity to make a play on defense. Even with some of their D-backs sitting out with injury, you still have Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter stepping out there and playing. You knew that it was only a matter of time before they were going to be able to pressure Riley Leonard at that point. They got it done, and Danielle Hunter would force the sack fumble, allowing Henry Tall to recover it and give the Texans essentially a shot at a one-play touchdown. Initially, it was supposed to be Tommy Togiai, another Ohio State man, attempting to make an Ohio State play on a run, but C.J. Stroud messed up the play call at the line, still managed to get himself in the end zone for what would be his first rushing touchdown since 2023. That is absolutely insane to think about, man. Truly insane to think about. But you know what? It is what it is, man. Nevertheless, the Colts and Texans would be forced to punt back-to-back, with them getting a brief handle on both Xavier Hutchinson and also Woody Marks to cap off that drive. The Colts had a long ways to go, though, but they still managed to get down the field 92 yards without any assistance from Jonathan Taylor whatsoever. It would be Josh Downs creeping over the middle and working on Kalen Bullock for a 30-yard gain. It would be Michael Pittman Jr. making a sound grab in space to get them down to the 5-yard line. And it would be Alec Pierce to break through the defense again in the corner of the end zone and find himself yet another score, his second on the day, from 8 yards out to give the Colts a lead, or at least bring this within a 3-point lead. The Texans had a chance to respond instantly, and it was looking that way for a second, because the Colts, could not stop Xavier Hutchinson in this game. They could not. Every single time they dialed up his number, especially when Mekhi Blackman was guarding him, because the Colts were also down cornerbacks in this game, man, they just kept on feeding him the ball. And they had no answer for a lot of these being in breaking routes over and over and over again, as they just gave him the inside leverage to work with. I'm like, that's not very wise on your end to do. But if you're going to do it, then the Texans are well within their right to keep on throwing the ball that way. Why should they stop for you? It wouldn't make any sense at all. Nevertheless, the Texans would be forced to settle for a field goal here. And ultimately, Riley Leonard just kept it going, bro. Alec Pierce was torching them over the top of the defense. And granted, coming out of Cincinnati, he was labeled as a deep threat. One of the first games in the year where you could say that, hey, he's making his own impact felt. It's usually Michael Pittman Jr. or a by committee thing going, but no, this was spurred primarily by Alec Pierce. And with that, they got in a goal-to-go situation where Riley Leonard stopped and skipped into the end zone for a touchdown run to give them a brief 1-point lead. Now, at that point, he became the first Colts quarterback with at least 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown in their first start. He's playing magnificently well. Meanwhile, the Texans at this point, it should be worth noting that, offense for a time would stall out because they would sit out their starters. When it became very evident that the Jags, who would actually win the game, so I don't even need to cover it by itself, they won that game 41-7 against the Titans, securing the AFC South title. We figured that was going to happen coming into Sunday. I mean, bro, the Titans have been terrible all season long. Against a red-hot Jags team, there's no way they were going to stand a chance against them. So they effectively ended that game at halftime. And if you're the Texans at that moment, even they were talking about it in the broadcast, it's you figured that decision was going to come because you don't need to risk your guys getting hurt in that situation. And at that point, you know where you're going to fall in seeding, and you just want to be able to live to see that next game with as full of a roster as you need to be ready to go. So they, as an offense, man, under Davis Mills, they would do okay. They put together 3 different field goal drives, but not much outside of that. Yet it would be their defense to keep them on ice. Now, yes, they did allow them to charge down the field on a field goal drive of their own, with Bailey Grupe kicking it from 39 yards out to make it. But once they forced this errant decision from Riley Leonard, they definitely had a little bit of an advantage here. Because at that moment, you knew that the pressure was starting to have an impact on him. He was trying to step up in the pocket and just make a play out of something that absolutely was not there. And it would get deflected, inevitably falling into the hands of Huzzy, one of their D-backs, for an interception that would instantly lead to a field goal drive for Houston. At that point, the Texans on this last drive as well, even with the Colts trying to establish ball control and literally driving down the field 61 yards across almost 9 minutes of play to try to get them a brief lead back, the Texans would still respond fast enough to work their way down the field and get a 43-yard field goal from a man in Kaimi Fairbairn, who has honestly, again, as was stated, he's been doing this for so damn long. So you imagine that he, with the game on the line, would secure the victory for them. But it wasn't totally done. Riley Leonard, even without being a starter in this case, did come in for relief last week to throw a Hail Mary, and it looked like another one. If they could get deep enough into the Houston territory, they could find a way to make that happen. But that was not meant to be. I don't know what made Ashton Dulin decide to run all over the place to try to extend the play on this kickoff return, and it would take them all the way down to 5 seconds on the clock in the game, period. I didn't understand that decision from him. And ultimately, with that, it put Riley Leonard in an awkward spot because they had the lateral now, and I just, oh man, this was so confusing. Because you have the laterals going down and taking place, but at the same time, as Riley Leonard is about to get the ball back after a number of them in a row, you have Tyler Warren and Gunkals, one of their offensive linemen, just standing there, waiting for something to happen instead of getting behind him, giving him an outlet as defenders are crowding him now. They're surrounding him and they're about to force a fumble. Ultimately, they do because of that indecision. And who else but Tommy Togiai, the Ohio State man, would recover the fumble and get the touchdown that he had been waiting for so long in this fucking game to end it 38-30 and give the Texans the 12-5 finish to the season as they make the playoffs and be the 5 seed, technically, because they had the damn tiebreaker over the Bills. In this game, honestly, numbers aren't really all that significant for the Texans, although it is worth noting that Xavier Hutchinson did have 5 receptions for 84 yards in this game. You know, they didn't ask C.J. Stroud to play the entire game, so he's not going to have a full game's worth of work necessarily. As for the Colts, though, man, what a game from Riley Leonard, even with those mistakes, man. 291 total yards, 3 total touchdowns, and an interception on 61.8% completion. Not half bad. And now you're in a weird spot if you're Chris Ballard. I think somebody even alluded to that point. You are likely going to have to give a sort of loyalty deal to Daniel Jones at this point, because he's kind of rejuvenated his career with you on what was a prove-it deal. And then, it's too early to say because, you drafted Riley Leonard that late in the entire thing. You're not expecting him to pan out to be much of anything. And yet he came out and he had this kind of performance for you. Now, granted, they Steichen and the coordinator for their squad, they opened up the playbook, the entire playbook, and put it out at his disposal. Like, I genuinely wasn't expecting that. I thought they were going to give him a more vanilla playbook, or at least like a set of a few plays to run, not ask him to do that much to try to take this team to victory. And no, they flipped the script there. So it just makes for an interesting dynamic. Like, it's hard to evaluate talent, I understand, but bruh, you have that going down and you already have a quarterback on your roster who you're about to pay, even with him dealing with an injury. It's just, it's more chaos that they don't need right now. Alec Pierce in this game would also have 4 receptions for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns, though he was ejected for simply putting a little bit of an elbow on the ref and barely nudging him. That's what, like, he was taken out of the game. And I saw him leaving. I'm like, okay, what's going on with him? No, they say he's ejected. I'm like, what the fuck? What the hell did you eject him for? Like, that's not an ejectable situation, dude. That shit is just so soft. Truly soft, man. Nevertheless, he had himself a day to where, with this game, he would cross the 1,000-yard threshold while having just 47 catches on the year. That yards per catch ratio is certainly crazy. Josh Downs would also have 4 receptions for 61 yards in this game. And Zaire Franklin added 12 tackles and 2 TFLs. Alright, moving on to the Lions and the Bears, and this would hold significance for Chicago as they could secure either the 2 or 3 seed, depending on what they did in this game. They did not play like it for at least a good portion of the first 3 quarters of the game. Like, just look at the first half alone. Oh, it was, it was bad. In the same way that they themselves came off of putting up 38 points in a losing effort to the 49ers team, got treated in a similar way to how the Seahawks did the 49ers in the Saturday game to close out that night. Like, it was all them. Honestly, it's honestly a little similar. They were able to establish a little bit of a running game for the first time in weeks after having just a number of struggle games with both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in this time. Not to mention, when it came to what they were doing in the passing game, man, it almost felt like the game plan was to target CJ Gardner-Johnson, rather, on every single pivotal down. Long second down, short third down, it didn't matter. Them Doms would not discriminate. And especially when it came to Amon-Ra St. Brown in the first half alone. He had 110 yards or so after having around that in 3 touchdowns in their first game. He was cooking them, and specifically CJ Gardner-Johnson. Because for whatever reason, Dennis Allen, he's had a greater defense throughout the season, especially when it comes to forcing takeaways. Yet he thought it a good idea to continuously put CJ Gardner-Johnson on coverage, man-to-man, against Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot. And Jared Goff, even with some pressure getting to him, bro, he was able to find that shit every single time. The only time there was a miss was when he had safety help down low in the box from the hard-hitting Jaquan Brisker. And that was really it in the first half. Every other time, they kept it going. It was Isaac Tislan getting it done too, and it was Jamison Williams also being able to torch some of the corner work. It had been Nahshon Wright covering Jamison Williams for at least a few reps in this game on his end. But nonetheless, they were generating offense. They were moving the ball down the field after just getting completely clamped up against the Vikings. Oh, they are not going to live that down. Nevertheless, with that being said, the length of some of these drives, too, is what you really have to take into consideration. It wasn't full-on bully ball, but they were dominating the clock. 6-minute drive, 7-minute drive, and then a different 5-minute drive to finally get in the end zone with a Jahmyr Gibbs Texas route from 15 yards out, working right on a linebacker, and you think a linebacker is going to match up well against the speedy Jahmyr Gibbs in space. Good luck. That was the thing for the Lions, though. And I guess the Bears could take that into account. Even with them having that advantage in time of possession, and even with them being able to accrue all that yardage, they also failed to convert in the red zone. They ended up having to settle for numerous field goals that could have been touchdowns in a perfect world. And they even ended up missing a field goal at the end of the half after what would turn into a fumble forced by Derek Barnes. Now, initially, I thought that this was an incompletion and it would stand as an incompletion. Nevertheless, this was on 4th down as Caleb Williams was trying to hit up Colson Loveland for a particular catch in Detroit territory. And you got in range that quickly because, again, fucking CJ Gardner-Johnson. Right? Nevertheless, it ended up being a miss, and, it could have been much worse than 13-0 at the end of the half. But it felt insurmountable for a second from the Bears' perspective. They could not do anything of their own. They were getting off the field much quicker. They, as a team who likes to run the ball, could not control the line of scrimmage themselves, as you had Al-Quadin Muhammad still getting enough interior pressure and Aiden Hutchinson continuing to be a dominant force. Like, they themselves were forced into a 3-and-out and forced into an early punt after a decent but unfulfilling drive. Not to mention this fumble that took place. So if you're seeing that ball for that low amount of time and you're not getting anything out of it, man, you have to be able to find a way to get things going sooner rather than later. Because if they fell too far behind, things could have gotten ugly. Like it did in the first game. Like it has traditionally gotten for the Bears against the Lions in at least the past few years. But it would still take a while for them to understand that. Because even coming out into this third quarter on a drive where you'd want to take control of things, Rock Ya-Sin was able to get a stop on them that forced an instant 3-and-out. And on their next possession, while things were looking a little promising, they finally started to get, targets and touches to Luther Burden III. But even then, you had Caleb Williams just send up a prayer and a half for some reason deep into the end zone trying to go for DJ Moore on this route all the way near the corner, and it ends up being underthrown and lurked by Avonte Maddox getting the positioning on him and ultimately forcing the takeaway there. Just not really the smartest idea in the world. And that honestly could have been the dagger at that point, as the Lions would proceed to go on a drive that churned down some clock as they got Khalif Raymond to also work against CJ Gardner-Johnson and succeed before trying to implement a form of the run game. Once they limited that, kept them a little off rhythm, and ultimately forced Jared Goff to step back. You know what happens every time that goes down. He had to waste this ball away and ultimately settle for another field goal from Jake Bates to make this 16-0. And then, in a matter of just a couple drives, the Bears would do what they have done all season long. Because even when they may have shot themselves in the foot like this, even when it looked as though they were dead for the first 3 quarters, they always find a way, at least this season, they always find a way to get themselves back into it. And you got Caleb Williams getting in his bag, with him ultimately finding Jade Walker for a 25-yard catch over the top of the defense yet again. Just a routine post route. And you had the UDFA from Texas A&M getting yet another score in this late stretch of the season. Not to mention, on this next drive, man, You had Caleb Williams nearly reach disaster when a fumble would take place, but still being backed up all the way on his own side of the field, he still found a way to rifle it to Cole Kmet instantly for a 19-yard gain. And Colston Loveland would once again show up with getting a massive gain and pair of them to keep on putting the Lions on the defensive even further, as Colston Loveland would get a 1-yard touchdown catch in the back of the end zone before having Cole Kmet get a tough and contested catch for the 2-point conversion to tie up the game just like that. Man, this was getting scary for the Lions at that point, who wanted to at least end the season off the right way. And it looked as though with them driving further and further into Bears territory, they could actually get it done. Only for whatever reason, with them getting near the 2-minute warning, they didn't decide to run the ball after that. I mean, Billings was called for a number of penalties himself in this game, and he had another encroachment that set them up perfectly to just run the football consistently. They just picked up a 9-yard gain with David Montgomery. You could close out the game that way. No, they allowed Jared Goff to drop back 3 straight times, stopping the clock for the Bears and not even forcing them to waste any of their timeouts at this point. Then you get to this 3rd down and you have them drop back again. You have no choice because it's 3rd and 20 after what would be a grounding for Goff. And he just threw it over the middle unexplainably, right to TJ Edwards, deflecting it. And it fell right into Kevin Byard III's hands for an interception that could have sealed the game. If only the Bears did not decide that, hey, we're going to hand this right back to them. No, literally. Williams himself would get called for grounding before having to be put in a 3rd and 20 situation himself before the 2-minute warning, instantly giving Detroit the ball back. And with that, all it took was one play from Amon-Ra St. Brown, to effectively end the game. Now, yes, you didn't want to have CJ Gardner-Johnson cover Amon-Ra St. Brown in man-to-man coverage, but they didn't even decide to put a single body on him, which is like really? Seriously, you don't put a single body on Amon-Ra St. Brown in clutch time? That's a little bold, and they promptly paid the price. Ultimately, Jake Bates would kick this 42-yard field goal to give the Lions a 9-8 finish to the season. You know, at least instilling a little bit of pride in that locker room before they just go off for any, off-season activity or whatever. But the Bears, depending on what happened in the Eagles and Commanders game, could have still been okay. If the Bears would have won, no matter what, they would have been the 2 seed. But if the Eagles had won with the Bears' loss, they could probably drop down to the 3 spot. So they would have to check that out right after the game ended. But as far as the numbers go, Jared Goff had 331 passing yards and a touchdown and an interception on 64.3% completion. The run game had 122 yards combined between Gibbs and Montgomery on 4.5 yards per carry. So at least you end off the season on a high note there. Amon-Ra St. Brown also had 11 receptions and 139 yards in this game, while Jamison Williams had 6 receptions for 74 yards. Jack Campbell also had 11 tackles in this game. As for the Bears, Caleb Williams had 212 passing yards along with 2 touchdowns and an interception on 60.6% completion. Their rushing attack was definitely limited, as they had just 65 rushing yards on 3.6 yards per carry, and Colston Loveland had 10 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown, while John A. Walker added 2 receptions for 36 yards and another score for them. I'll address it as I get into other games, but everything else by this point had been set up in terms of the playoff picture across the entire NFL. except for one final spot, the dreaded AFC North Division title. And that would promptly be decided on Sunday Night Football in the game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, a rivalry that dates all the way back, in the eyes of some people, since the beginning of time. And it would also be the 40th iteration of the match between both John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. The hatred runs deep between both teams. You already knew that, but now it was amplified. You are literally fighting for your playoff lives. And while you may be a neutral fan watching this, you're probably thinking you're about to get a hell of a game on display tonight. I couldn't sit here and wholeheartedly say that someone would not be disappointed by the outcome, because one of these teams were getting their asses sent home. So, hey, you had 60 minutes to decide a winner. In the event that niggas wanted to try to tie the shit. Maybe overtime, depending on how things went. Well, the Ravens came out with the answer. But their theme of the entire season has been consistency, or lack thereof, being present. Because it doesn't even do it enough to just go by play. You have to understand, when you have Derrick Henry on the first fucking run, getting damn near 40 yards on it, and even then it was called back a little bit with a blindside block penalty. Some of the yardage got taken off, but still a booming run to start out the game in Acrisure Stadium. And he proceeded to go on and have a half where he ran for 100 yards. The third game that he'd done it in the first half in this season, which is the most since 2020, and he also did that same thing then. He was dominant on the ground. And the Steelers, a team that has usually had his number throughout the course of his career, did not have an answer for him in the first half. Not to mention, the ability for him to run the ball like that instantly set up a shot play to Devontae Walker on an ensuing fourth down in the drive, where they caught Jalen Ramsey out of position. And at that point, with him being a bit slower on his end, he ain't gonna have the speed that he once did to catch up with the ultra-fast Walker out in space. Got a 38-yard touchdown off of that to open up the scoring in the game. Then what? That is literally the way to describe everything else. Then what? You were doing everything, seemingly, that you needed to do, and yet at every moment, at every pivotal moment in a drive, you did not have the demanding and forthright answer that you needed. Between the unrelenting pressure that the Steelers were able to get at times, even with TJ Watt coming back in his return and not even registering that many pressures himself. It was Nick Herbig getting to Lamar Jackson. It was Alex Highsmith getting to Lamar Jackson. It was Cameron Hayward wrecking shit in the backfield like the Ohio State man consistently does. Fair enough. Nothing gave later on. All you had to show for it was that one touchdown drive and a field goal to close out the entire half. After having that kind of domination, that's highly unfortunate stuff. And even more so when you consider how things were going on the opposite side. Because while you had Alex Highsmith doing all these things, and just some undisciplined play on those front lines, the Steelers themselves were absolutely limited. And I mean, everybody could smell it. Yes, DK Metcalf made his own decision in terms of doing that to the fan and, by and large, taking himself out of action for the next couple of games following that. However, defensively, for most of this time, the Ravens were doing exactly what they needed to do. If this is a game predicated on physicality and how hard one team can hit the other, well, they were doing that to absolute perfection. They weren't even allowing the Steelers to really run the ball all that well, and that's where their efficiency in some of these last few ball games has come from. Being able to get ahead of the sticks, keep Aaron Rodgers clean in the pocket, which, again, was going to be a struggle for a pass rush that is not particularly great and has not been great all season long. But at the very least, in terms of that, you were able to dictate that. You were able to get some timely pressures to force a few stops here and there, and hey, you kept the Steelers off the board for as much as possible. The thing with this is that, as it was made very clear early on, between trying to see Adam Thielen get ahead of Nate Wiggins, clearly these wide receivers are not going to be able to separate, and clearly these wide receivers are not on the same par as DK Metcalf is. And the Ravens were able to use that to their advantage for a while in this one. It also kept them making sure that, hey, if you're going to do that, well, at least we have attention towards Gainwell and Warren to where we can get ourselves out of the backfield and get some extra yardage after the catch. Because 66% of their yards through the air across the entire season leading up through week 17 had been after the catch, even with DK Metcalf in. And that issue of not being able to create your own space more than like 5 yards down the field or so would be even more amplified. Like in the first half, I think they mentioned that Aaron Rodgers was something like, 5 on passes 15 plus yards down the field or something like that. And you don't have the talent for it. Adam Thielen's not a burner. Marquez Valdez-Scantling can't fucking catch, even though he got a few, to my surprise. But when he needs to catch, he all of a sudden doesn't have hands anymore. Got fucking stone in them shits. Nevertheless, they were able to force enough pressure on the offense as a whole to keep them behind schedule. And even when they got to this 4th and 1, for example, they tried to do the damn Spartan play with the Ravens stopping it on their own side of the field, mind you. And yet that was the drive that led only to a field goal. You can't settle for those kinds of things. You just can't in those situations. The Steelers were a little bit lucky to be in there. And I mean, hey, with Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell on back-to-back plays on one of these particular drives, getting out of the backfield in space and making defenders miss, they were able to ultimately get themselves on the board. But still, for a while in this, you felt as though if the Ravens had managed to impose their will a little better, they'd probably be up by more than 2 possessions at this point. Not still being locked into a 10-3 match. And it nearly cost them right then and right there within the half. The fact that the Steelers managed to get down the field pretty much from inside their own 10-yard line and drive 89 yards down the fucking field in a matter of 3 minutes was possibly the worst thing that could have happened to the Ravens defense in that situation. They were taking advantage of the fact that they had all 3 of their timeouts, but between you giving up gashes of runs, not just to Jaylen Warren to start off the drive, but I mean also Aaron Rodgers, and granted you're going to let him run, you're not going to put a spy on him, but a 20-yard scramble out of him being pressured by multiple defenders on that team, you just could not have that happen. And they continued to take themselves further and closer into go-to-go territory. They had him exactly where they wanted him, especially when you consider this defensive pass interference on Kyle Hamilton near the end of the first half. And, I mean, hey, it was there for the taking right then, right there. Even with you struggling to really make anything happen on the offensive side of the football, you could come away with some points here. You could possibly score a touchdown. And it felt like they could do it once they lined up in the same Spartan play to, from my understanding, call it. Stupidly, they decided to pitch it out to Kenneth Gainwell. And credit to Alohi Gilman And Kyle Van Noy, even with some of the rough nights that they had, as Aloy Gilman would later get concussed up and struggle to stay in the game with injury himself, he would at least make a pretty damn good tackle right here to keep the Steelers off the board. But you knew in that moment you were playing with fire if you continued to waste away on the offensive side yourself, even with the momentum you imposed. Like, there was no time to be playing around, fooling around, doing any of that in this game. You knew what was on the line coming into this. Even if you didn't want to state it directly, you had an idea of what was going on. And yet, everything would start to change in the second half. Not only would they proceed to get just domed up down the field with some pretty accurate passes from Aaron Rodgers, mind you, a dot the fryer move, a pass right over Marlon Humphrey's shoulders to Adam Thielen, akin to a similar one that the damn Lions had against them on Monday Night Football earlier in the season to extend the lead in that game for Detroit. You had those pairs of things happen, and then they turn down the field again, get in manageable territory, and go for it on fourth down, effectively run Spartan to get the first. Okay, fair enough. Because you knew that was coming. In short yardage situations, it's been something that they've been cultivating over the past couple weeks, and they've been spamming that shit. So it was definitely going to come into play as far as this game is concerned. And they finally got it to work. But what's that? What is that they see across from them? Let's investigate this. Let's get up to the line real quick, y'all. Let's hustle. Let's do our job on our side of the ball and not worry about whatever the hell they got going on. And Connor Hayward promptly takes it right up the gut for a touchdown score without any Ravens defender even on that side ready to go. And I think that play, more than a lot of the other ones that would proceed to happen, said a whole hell of a lot about what the mindset was of this team. Because the idea is that it's always been something with them throughout the year. Always been something. Injuries, sure. Time management, poor time management, sure. Terrible decision making, sure. All those things could play into it. Untimely turnovers, yes, absolutely. But discipline, my goodness, you should have seen, because they replayed it several times. I see Mike Green's ass struggling to get set on the fucking line, and he's falling all over the place. Multiple Ravens defenders don't even know where the fuck they're supposed to be aligned at on the particular play. And any amount of resistance that could have been offered in that situation was non-existent because barely anybody on that side of the ball was prepped and ready to go. Yes, the Steelers were smart to run with tempo, but you gotta at least be ready. Get instantly set for the next fucking play. Don't even worry about substitutions at that point. Just get on the line and get ready. Whatever it takes. Instead, that was far from the case. And that wouldn't even be the worst of it from the defense, but that is the spitting image of where this team has been at. Because that's given a pass, I suppose. And in a sense, for those who may feel a particular way about coaching, well, that could be a strong indictment on coaching at multiple levels. Not to mention as well, you literally proceed to, on the next drive, just have Lamar Jackson drop back multiple times, and under pressure, a ball of his promptly gets deflected by the Ohio State man and Cameron Hayward, and intercepted by TJ Watt in his return. Luckily, they were able to hold them to a field goal in this next possession. But you're creating an unwinnable ordeal here by not relying on a man in Derrick Henry who had gotten you there in the first place. And yes, the balance between Jackson and Henry it's been a struggle to figure out for a while. To have only 8 passes at a particular point, if you are Lamar Jackson, is kind of tough entering the fourth quarter. But the fact that Derrick Henry in this case, with what he had done in the first half, only finished with 5 rushes in the second half entirely, in a game where you had slowly, if you're the Ravens in this situation, been starting to lose the battle in the trenches. That's what the game comes down to. Comes down to smash mouth football, and comes down to physicality. You've been losing that battle. And you don't lean on a man who can promptly control that by himself. You could also consider that as a potential indictment on the coaching aspect of things, the commandeering of a particular game plan. Because we know how dominant of a force Derrick Henry can be by himself. I know that the talent of Lamar Jackson is undeniable. That is very clear. But the man clearly, even with him trying to return and clearly trying to do his best for the team, wasn't at full go. He was not 100%. And to give him an opportunity to alleviate some of that burden off would be ideal in a situation like this. Yet you still entered the fourth quarter kind of operating in the same way and making it even more difficult on him. Because with him needing to answer the call, although you can credit Travis Jones on the defensive side for finally stepping up, getting some pressure on Aaron Rodgers, fair enough. When the time came for Lamar Jackson to step up and be the 2-time MVP that he's been for this team, what the hell did he promptly respond with? The nigga responded with 2 fucking touchdowns of more than 50 plus yards down the field to Zay Flowers, single-handedly. The first one, just an absolute dime down the middle of the field, right over the middle, perfectly, after breaking multiple tackle attempts by, I believe it was Highsmith and Benton, trying to sack him in one fell swoop, broke out of them shits, fired a bomb over Patrick Queen's head for the score to Zay Flowers from 50 yards out. He wants to be the villain so bad, but the nigga, as soon as he saw Zay Flowers in his vicinity, he knew something was suspicious. He did not want to have that matchup. Nobody, very few defenders, I will say, in the league can keep up with Zay Flowers when it comes to his ability after the catch, when it comes to his just straight line speed. You know, you can say what you want about him as an all-around wide receiver, because granted, yes, there are transgressions on his end that need to be fixed. But bruh, he was winning that matchup 9 times out of 10. Yet still, in that response, in between all of this, you get Kenneth Gainwell bullying with the help of linemen, getting out in front, over to the side, and just keeping Ravens defenders at bay the entire time to get that 2-yard rushing touchdown. But even with being down in the situation, Lamar Jackson yet again helps them take the lead back on what was a very smart play call by Todd Monken. Because even with Derrick Henry, and just understand this, if the idea of having Derrick Henry run the football on 3rd down can do enough damage to where you have linebackers spread all across the right side of the field on this play to stop the man on what they thought was a pitch play initially. They fake a toss, and they have Zay Flowers run free again, with Jalen Ramsey being distracted once more, enough to the point where he's thinking about the run. Zay Flowers is already 10-15 yards downfield. And you want to say, if you're a defender, about how you box a particular player up, you could draw a fucking rectangle, a square fucking rectangle, around the area in which Zay Flowers had room to operate, in which this ball could be thrown, where there's no defender near him. Even though you see Asante Samuel Jr. kind of creep back in to tackle Zay Flowers on what would be a 64-yard touchdown catch, bruh, when the ball was thrown, he was nowhere close to him whatsoever. It was a truly great play call. And it gave them the lead near the 2-minute warning, where you would hope and trust that your defense can do something, anything in that scenario to get off the field and get you a win to secure the division. It's on the line. And what do they proceed to do? Another play that is damning to me. And maybe this isn't about coaching, maybe this isn't about particular alignments. But on national television, with the entire NFL fan base in a way, watching this game come down to the wire like this, you're Chidobe Awuzie, and you don't know what the hell you're doing in the first place. Then, all of a sudden, you're in such flux that you try to make a particular shift of some kind. And Calvin Austin III snatches your fucking ankles on a double move to get up the field and produce a vintage Aaron Rodgers moment into the end zone for a 26-yard touchdown catch. What the hell? What explaining is there in that situation? The man fell to his fucking knees and yielded a wide open touchdown catch with the game on the fucking line. And at that point, there's about 50 or so seconds left, putting even more of an onus on Lamar Jackson to try to get something done. Although, they would luck out because the usually reliable Chris Boswell missed a PAT, foreshadowing. My nigga, foreshadowing. The game was still winnable if they could get down the field and score a field goal themselves. And by the grace of the man upstairs himself, they were able to do it. It literally came down to a 4th and 7 simply because they were not giving Lamar Jackson enough time to produce quality plays. And even when he was able to get out of the pocket on, I think this was 2nd down, DeAndre Hopkins is being told, hey, I'm trying to playmaker this thing. Run upfield a little bit so I can hit you. He doesn't move. Okay. Nevertheless, you force the incomplete pass on 3rd down, and it all comes down to that 4th and 7. And Isaiah Likely, a guy who has also had a much vaunted season this year as well, made the play right on Jalen Ramsey to moss him, catch the football, and get down for a 26-yard gain that would have supposedly won the Ravens the game, could have supposedly put them in position to take this over, take the division. And in a season full of craziness, in a season defined by just game-changing plays, in pivotal moments, in a season where you saw teams come from behind within 2 minutes on several occasions and come out on top to win these games in the wildest of fashions. Multiple Game of the Year candidates coming down to absolute craziness at the seemingly right moments of time. It would truly take a miracle to have something so guaranteed go so terribly wrong for the team in question. Hey, what luck can give away sometimes, luck can take as well. And with the game on the line, to close out this NFL regular season, the field goal from Tyler Loop would veer to the wide right in the general area where before the game even started, you had a priest pour holy water in that end zone. And we didn't make much of it in that moment. We laughed them off. We didn't know that the game was going to end up being like that particularly, but in that moment, by a sheer miracle, the skin of their teeth, the home team, despite having Boswell miss the PAT in the first place, they were able to overcome that. They were able to overcome the absence of DK Metcalf and ultimately win the damn ball game. Wow. Okay? That is wild. And there are a number of things that I have to say about the aftermath from the Ravens' perspective. But obviously, this is about the Steelers and them winning it. To get into their numbers right now, Aaron Rodgers had 294 passing yards, a touchdown on 66% completion, while Jaylen Warren led all of their rushers with 66 rushing yards on the ground. Kenneth Gainwell was also their leading receiver out of the backfield with 8 receptions for 64 yards, and Calvin Austin added 3 receptions for 55 yards and a touchdown, while Pat Freiermuth had 3 receptions for 51 yards. Adam Thielen also had 3 receptions for 43 yards in this game. And hey, with the win, the Steelers, they would secure the AFC North in the wildest way. Mike Tomlin had the nerve to beat his chest and blow a kiss goodbye like he did not. Barely escaped this one with a win. But for a man who has constantly done nothing but win in Pittsburgh, I suppose he's well within his right to do that as he pleases. But as for the Ravens, man, and oh man, there is a lot to say about it. So to look at this from Lamar Jackson's perspective, about first addressing his numbers. 11 of 18 passing for 238 yards and 3 touchdowns and an interception. With the game on the line at several points, trailing at several points, he did exactly what you would want him to do as a 2-time NFL MVP of this league, and he responded back mightily with torches down the fucking field for scores that in any other event could have ended it right then and right there. But football is also a team sport, even if we want to continue looking at quarterbacks specifically. Yes, they are going to be engineering offenses. They have the ball in their hands for most of the time. But god damn it, there's more to it than that. And the fact of the matter is, when looking at this game, when seeing how this shit went at all 3 phases of the fucking game, these narratives surrounding Lamar Jackson are just disgusting, and they need to fucking stop. Some of them are absolutely delusional. Some of them are just straight up vile, and they make no fucking sense. They have to stop. The idea that the man, again, like literally just a few weeks back, he goes out against the Patriots, getting his fucking back kneed in by a different Patriots player. First thing that comes to mind for people is not whether or not he's going to be able to go in a few weeks' time or whether or not he's okay. The first thought in their mind is he's quitting on the fucking team. He's quitting on the team. He's not trying to go out there and put it all out there on the line for the squad. No, he's quitting. Well, what the hell does this prove to you? Because at less than 100%, the man looked as fresh as ever when it demanded and commanded him to look that way. Man literally went 7 of 10 passing for like 172 yards or something in the fourth quarter alone. But he's quitting on the fucking team. Why the hell did you think he came back in this game to play it? Knowing that the season was on the line. Would a quitter have done that? Please ask yourself, would a fucking quitter have done that? And yes, some of the criticism that is levied towards him is fair. He is not absolved of all blame in all of the situations that have ailed the Ravens over the past few years. But this game right here if you are still coming out of this and saying that it is all, and so the onus is solely on him, you are actually not paying fucking attention. Like I said, that whole sequence from the defense to stop Spartan, which they ran 2 times in a fucking row to not get fucking set, that is a discipline issue. That is a coaching problem. You think Lamar Jackson can do anything about that? You think Lamar Jackson can do anything about having Chidobe Awuzie get his fucking ankles broken by Calvin Austin III for the fucking game? Can Lamar Jackson truly control Tyler Loop in that situation, missing the field goal? Fuck no. What the fuck is wrong? Like, tighten up. That's not on him at all. And the decision to use Derrick Henry as well, even he, if you go back, if you listen to some of the stuff that he said when they first got Derrick Henry, the idea was that they could help each other out to get the best out of each other. But we're not going to talk about that situation. No, we're going to have Mike Preston of the home team of the Baltimore Sun come out and be confirmed on his own end to put out false information about him missing team meetings or whatever kind of propaganda you're trying to put out to make just random noise and smoke around Lamar Jackson that isn't fucking there. Bring up that quote or those series of quotes talking about how he would want to have Derrick Henry there to get the best out of each other and complement each other perfectly. And yet, they still decide in the situation to have Lamar Jackson be the one to respond. They were doing that to cover up for the fact that they were not fucking including Derrick Henry into the offense like they should have, when the game was still close enough for them to make a move and get him involved. That is not a Lamar Jackson thing. At all. Now, yes, the contract next year could command him a ton of money, and he is the marquee player. But there is so much other stuff going on with this damn team that it is hard for you to sit back and say to yourself, oh, I'm going to blame that man. And you know what? He's a quitter. Get him out of here. We don't want him anymore. We'll trade him. We'll gladly trade him. We don't need Lamar Jackson anymore. He's not getting us to where we want to be at as a fan base. Get him gone. Yes, this is going to absolutely be disappointing for Ravens fans. They do expect better. A lot of them are very hardcore guys who were around for the last Super Bowl that they won. And with any fan base in any sport, you're going to want them to eventually win the whole thing. You want to have them be in a position to compete for the major victory in a championship game in their respective sport. Or at least show over a course of some years that they are taking the steps forward that they need to ultimately get there one day. Any fan would desire that. And to say that you don't, you're actually lying. And just, like, don't. But bruh. To be so delusional to say that this is a player that shouldn't be on your team anymore is utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. Because, yes, for all of the stuff that has gone on in the playoffs, you can't discredit that. But he has done nothing but elevate this organization since he's been here. Nothing. And when you see how this game goes down, when you see just how much shit over the past few years that even if he has done in the playoffs, do you understand how much he himself, as the quarterback, as the face of the franchise, is masking up below the fucking surface? Like, how stupid can you be to see some of those things go down in this game and still suggest that he is outright the problem? And he's gotta leave. Where did some of these conversations even begin? Because there is a different scenario. You have a fucking NFL executive talking about a potential for him to be traded to the fucking Vikings. And just think about that. Just think about that for a second. Think about that for a quick second. Instead of trying to talk about all this other random shit. The only way that you would win a trade with Minnesota in that situation, and even entertaining the idea in the first place, it's fucking ridiculous. But just think about this. You're giving up Lamar Jackson. Your best bet, on top of potentially padding other picks onto that or whatever, would be to have Minnesota give up Justin Jefferson. Player for player. And do you really think, even with the season that they had this season, even with him being underutilized and expressing his frustration, can you really sit here and tell me that they would be willing to trade Justin Jefferson under any circumstances after just paying the man a few years ago? No. Then consider this. You're really entertaining the idea. This same executive is entertaining the idea that, okay, we trade him for either of J.J. McCarthy or Max Brosmer. And we've seen how both of those niggas have played this season. You were talking about trading for J.J. McCarthy or Max Brosmer. Either or, I don't give a fuck. You think either of them are succeeding with this team? I don't care if they're cheap and inexpensive. They're ass. They're not good. And you think that even with the team as it is constructed right now, with inferior quarterback play, would actually make it further in the playoffs to win the entire thing? You don't want to stagnate. But obviously, if you think for a fucking second, you clearly, if you were even to think about doing that trade, are getting much worse as an overall team by losing that kind of value and getting back that bullshit in return. The move would make absolutely no sense. In between Mike Preston pulling back his own comments to be false, and that shit, that still hasn't stopped the entire thing from getting out of control amongst the fan base. Because they're running with this narrative for some reason and truly believing this shit to be the case. And like it's crazy. As I said before, I can say it here now. Maybe if y'all niggas are going to be that ungrateful for what Lamar Jackson has done to this point, and yes, you deserve to want more from him. You deserve to want him to get you to a Super Bowl. I'll give you that. But if you're going to be that ungrateful with what he has given you over the course of his entire career to this point, maybe he shouldn't leave the fucking team. Because he does not deserve to be around a fucking fan base that has no respect for him as a fucking player whatsoever, if you are really willing to throw him in those unorthodox ass fucking trades and value him like he's not the caliber of player that he fucking is. You deserve to have him go to another team and let him ball out over there and see, with whatever whack-ass return you get, just how much you're really going to get out of that particular return. Because it's probably going to be next to nothing. And you're probably going to be far worse off than you already were. The nerve of that shit. And then not to mention, too, before I get to my next point about it, because there were some news that just came out. Bruh. It is a game at the end of the day. And I understand that niggas are pissed off about having him lose them the game on the kick. But he's feeling that. He's feeling that. You had Harbaugh embrace the man and walk off with him as he still had his head in his helmet, going through the motions. He's feeling that right now. Still, to this very day. It's a pivotal moment of time, and it's a truly tragic one for him. But to take that moment of failure, of vulnerability, and then weaponize it against the same dude in such a personal and direct way. The death threats, making suggestive statements about his fucking girlfriend. What the fuck is wrong with y'all? What the fuck, or what is wrong with y'all? You and me both know that is way too fucking far. It should never get to that fucking point of time. I'd like to see how you would react if the same thing happened to you on an intimate post like that. How the fuck would you react in that situation? And you're going out there and you have the nerve to do that to him? The hell wrong with y'all, man? Hey, there is no place for that shit. And again, if you're going to do that as a fan of the team, maybe you're too obsessed. Don't be a fan of the fucking team. Get yourself out of here. They should not claim you. They should not claim you as a fan if you're going to do that to them and turn on them in that swift of an instant. The second you don't have something go a particular way. That's fucking crazy. That's crazy. And tying it all together, if this is a true situation where it is all on Lamar Jackson, if he was the onus of all the blame, why are they just now, per Adam Schefter, after an 18-year tenure, firing John Harbaugh? As of this moment, as of the recording of this video, they just hit the red fucking button and sent his ass out of there. Do you believe that it's all Lamar Jackson now? Do you really think that it's all on him? If they decided that with this move, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do next, because the understanding from my knowledge is that what other options are out there at head coach if you were to entertain the idea in the first place? Throughout the entire season, we're having conversations about it. We're dancing around the idea, but there aren't a lot of head coaching candidates out here that the team might be looking for right now. And you might have had one in Mike McDonald. Thank you. You might have had one there. He's with the Seahawks and he's doing what he's doing now. There is no coming back from that. So it's like, what is the next step? Do you go out and get another one? Do you hire from within and maybe elevate Todd Monken in that situation? All of that will remain to be seen. And those are murky waters for an organization who had been accustomed to hardball football for the last 18 years. But they decided after that time, the shift, the clear shift in culture, the lack of an identity across the board was enough of an indictment on him, on his coaching decisions, on some of his influence he's had in roster construction, to suggest that he is no longer worthy of being the Baltimore Ravens football head coach. Not Lamar Jackson and his supposed lack of energy, lack of desire to put everything on the line for this team. And you had other players step up in this situation too. Derrick Henry had 126 yards, finished with a good overall game. Zay Flowers had 4 receptions for 138 yards and 2 scores in this damn game. The players performed. They executed. But what did that come down to? Mike Tomlin beating his chest, blowing him a kiss goodbye and punching him in the mouth over and over and over again while out coaching his ass on national television with the division on the line and a playoff spot on the fucking line. It's not a Lamar Jackson thing. It's not. And that is why They just did this. Per Adam Schefter. As I was honestly about to wrap this game up. There's a lot of uncertainty around it. Because from one end, the game was that close. It was so close to call. Another crazy ending to what has been a great regular season. All across. Like, again, we're going to say this about everyone, but you truly could say, and I wouldn't be mad at you, this was one of the best seasons. And maybe of all time. And, depending on how that ends, we'll see. But it was truly that close to call. So maybe in that situation, maybe you give them another go. But at the same time, you have conflicting timelines. You have a team ready to win now, with players that are in their prime, in Derrick Henry, who just turned 32, in Lamar Jackson, who is about to turn, I believe, 29 tomorrow. Terrible birthday presents for them both. Fair enough. But it's not like they are bad players at all. They are ready for the moment. They are ready to go as players. And they have stagnated under Harbaugh for the last few years. A change in their eyes, although I didn't see it coming. You could argue that they were still going to be stubborn about this thing. They finally recognized that it might just have been time to move forward in a different direction completely in terms of who exactly is going to be the guy leading a group of men in that locker room. Maybe they felt that way, and they're more than inclined to do so. It's not like it's all bad for John Harbaugh. His legacy is going to be a guy who did win them a Super Bowl. That's not one that you can take away from him. But that is just too far long ago. And it's been clear with some of the frustrations of those fans. As delusional as some of them might be. Because what has happened since then? Produced one of the worst seasons in Ravens history in 2015 and was on pace to do the same thing this year. Until they got Lamar Jackson back. And has constantly fallen short. Not just in terms of record, but with some of the decisions. You're constantly left scratching your head at what the hell he decides to do. And not to mention the late game leads are probably the biggest thing. This was yet another game where, hey, if they play their cards right, man, they can have an advantage in this. And yet you blow a 10-0 advantage to ultimately lose at the buzzer when you had your foot on the gas to start out. That makes no sense. Then you consider all the stuff that went down against the Bills earlier in the season, against the Patriots, over and over and over again, entering the fourth quarter seemingly with a victory in the bag and not closing the fucking deal. And that's what these seasons have come down to ultimately. Same kind of flow. You have everything at your disposal that you would need to get over the hump, and you are constantly finding a way, a weird and unconventional way to fuck it all up. It is not that Harbaugh is a bad coach, but maybe, especially for the older Ravens fans out there, maybe he simply is not the guy who can lead them to the promised land anymore. That window has far passed from this point. It is gone. It's been eviscerated. And they try to creep back in there. They try to give you some life. It's gone. It's just utterly ridiculous, man. Like, y'all have the nerve to constantly just call that out and then not consider that, hey, if that truly was the case, they just up and fire John Harbaugh. And depending on how they do it, because I'll probably make an overall video in terms of different Black Monday, etc. Trends in terms of the coaching cycle. That'll probably come tomorrow. I'm gonna have to break this up. Like I know last year I did tie that all in together, but I covered those games in a much shorter way. So there's just no shot I'm gonna be able to tie all of that into this video. But it was more than convenient, just thinking about it, to tie that in right then, right there, as it happened. Because it's more than relevant to the fucking point. Like, the same thing we saw with some of the other ones that I'll get into. It's like, yo, like, these coaches are established guys. It's not like they are completely inept or just terrible. But the times in the league and the timelines in the league for some of these respective teams may no longer align with what the skill sets of some of these coaches are. And in an era where you have a number of different guys who are aces at being tacticians of the game in the league today, to be that inept with clock management repeatedly and to blow that many late game leads repeatedly is not a good habit, not a good trait to have for a head coach at all. And it says a lot that they are more than willing to, for the first time in about 18 years, because I think they hired the man in January of 2008. Literally. Just think about that. Damn near, I think they mentioned it was like January 9th, 2008 was his first press conference with the team. Damn near a few days to the 18 years of distance. They figured that it was just... the time has come for Harbaugh to just hang it up with this team. That says a whole hell of a lot. And when you take all that into consideration, you cannot convince me. Honestly, at this point, like I was thinking about a bunch of different things, but honestly, this might just have to be its own particular segment, and I ain't even a fucking Ravens fan. But y'all niggas need to understand that if all that is in play, if all that is out there on the table for you, you can't still tell me that it is solely on Lamar Jackson himself when you have them literally needing to figure out ways to acquire a ton of different services this season. Shit ton of free agents. They need to improve all across the offensive line. Maybe with the exception of the center position. Your guys out there aren't going to get it done. Especially when you look at the much lambasted Daniel Fulele. Maybe deservedly so. You need a true go ball guy on the outside with the size to play as a number one wide receiver. And to not get too deep into it, because I've explained it in my own time, and I've been shut down by it. But take a little insight into some of these other wide receivers around the league who could be pending free agents next season. Because the draft, with some of the guys there, if you were looking Jordan Tyson's way, you aren't going to have the capital to go get his services. I don't imagine him sliding that far down the draft board. But look at some other guys. Take a chance on some people every now and then. Alec Pierce is a name that comes up to mind for me. I'm doubling down on that shit. Alec Pierce, that same Alex Pierce, that can stretch the top of defenses and have 47 receptions for 1,003 yards this season. His first 1,000-yard season. Been a much more consistent producer than Rashad Bateman has throughout his time as a Colt. He's going to be 26 years old next season. And the thing that does come to mind there is that he is on his last year of his rookie contract. If paying him is a problem, depending on how negotiations go with the Colts, don't go for him. But if there is a chance for you to be in his ballpark in terms of money that he may want, and you don't pull the fucking trigger, you're going to regret it. I'm telling you right now. Because if he can put those numbers up as a guy who might be considered a number 2 to Michael Pittman Jr., what the hell could happen if you make him a number 1 caliber wide receiver on the outside to flank Zay Flowers? Or to move Zay Flowers to a more natural spot on the fucking field? That could be dangerous for your offense and give you yet another multi-dimensional layer to things. These are the moves and decisions that you'll have to grapple with over the entire offseason. You're going to have ample time to. But through it all, it goes much further than him when you consider how exactly they're going to adjust to building around him as a player. Filling out that entire defense. Desperately need a pass rusher. That's not in Lamar Jackson's control. Front office, and again, there could be a massive overhaul. This just happened. So you could really, there are a number of things that could be on the line here. We won't know until they happen. But there's a lot to think about there. So the next time you want to go call yourself trying to just put it all on him, think again. Rewatch the footage throughout the entire season. As a matter of fact, go watch the games, man. Don't look at particular lowlights and talk to me same with any player around the league, man. Because there's a lot about that. You'll have, in this day and age with social media, just one highlight or low light make or break a player's value to a specific fan or consumer of the sport, and that is not going to tell you the full story. Even watching the full games will not tell you the full story. But you need to have a somewhat fair balance of looking at analytics, of watching the games in real time, of consuming different material in other ways surrounding the games to get an idea of what the hell is going on. If you're so reliant on doing that, you're just going to constantly be coming up with some of the most ignorant shit imaginable. Because that's all it is. All that shit. Just spouting opinion and opinion without proper context, without proper fucking fact. Gotta get it together. Because this Lamar Jackson shit has gone further than that. Believe me, when you talk about, oh, he's a running back this, he's a running back that. Where the fuck is Bill Polian at now? Right. We've already established how that was in previous content. But, bruh, when it comes to this shit, some of these other ones, man, y'all are just fucking ridiculous. Y'all are ungrateful as fuck. And he does not need to be with a team, with a fan base, who's going to fucking treat him like that. Who's going to act as if he doesn't have the fucking passion to play for the fucking team. When he more than exudes that on a week-to-week basis when he's fucking healthy. And why is he unhealthy? Look at the fucking patchwork going on everywhere else around him. Still not convinced. Even with that vast number of questions, and the firing of John Harbaugh just today. as I was recording this and about to end this off before going on this tangent, mind you. You can't make up that kind of timing. What more do you need to understand about this situation? Seriously. Alright, moving on to the action that I didn't watch, and I am going to try to go through these as rapid fire as I can, because a lot of them are just general, like, games between divisional rivals that don't really have a lot of implications in terms of playoff picture. Like this one, for example. The Raiders would beat the Chiefs 14-12, and yet somehow still secure the number 1 overall pick by sheer happenstance. Numbers aren't significant in a game where you have Aiden O'Connell and Kenny Pickett trying to do their hardest to play against Shane Bichelle and Chris Oladokun. Neither team was efficient from the field. You could tell that was the case. In a game where a lot of their core players were out. Xavier Worthy didn't play, it looked like. Travis Kelce was barely utilized. Marquise Brown was their leading wide receiver for Kansas City. And we know what's been going on with the Raiders over the last few weeks. I guess, literally, it took a 60-yard field goal, mind you, in a game where you literally had a safety take place. It took a fucking 60-yard field goal from Daniel Carlson to win this. Honestly, if I'm Daniel Carlson, I want out of that shit too, man. I don't want to keep getting in games that remind me of the fucking 3-0 result against the Vikings in 2022. I want no further reminders of that game. And yet you're actively trying to put me in that situation again, while not having me play any meaningful football. I want out. The Saints, in a game where the Bucs needed them to win, Baker Mayfield was watching from the comfortability of his own home, as he told Lisa Salters post-game on Saturday. Well, he was definitely going to start breaking a lot of shit in his room. Because as soon as I saw tracking this game that Tyler shucked through this interception to the offer of all cornerbacks, I knew the game was a wrap. Even with them being able to, after a Falcons field goal, get a touchdown on the board, it wouldn't be enough. And the Falcons, with the win against the Saints by a score of 19-17, would help the Panthers via tiebreaker to get into the playoffs and take control of the NFC South. Hey, I mean, they're in the dance. So they no matter how you got there, you're in there, and that's something to celebrate. But holy fuck, what a crazy ass division, man. It's not even like Bijan Robinson had the most dominant game. He combined for just 18 touches and 43 fucking yards. A complete misuse of his talent. And they still won because on one of these damn touchdowns, Drake London was so fucking wide open that it did. Like, nobody was over in his vicinity. Kirk Cousins was able to have a clean pocket and even step out unguarded, unaccounted for. Have enough time to get the damn pass off for free. Okay. Aldrick Esime for the Saints had 21 rushes for 63 yards. Not really an efficient day for him either. But, man, there would be some different news for Chris Olave. And I suppose it would be better for me to just carry that over into the next video too. In fact, it's probably the first thing I'm going to be talking about when I look at this thing here. Terribly unfortunate for him, but it still wouldn't have done anything for them here. The Giants would also fall down to the 5th overall pick after winning against the Cowboys. Now, granted, it didn't look like they played Dak Prescott a whole ton in this game. I think they only kept him in for like the first half. It was still a loss for them at that point, but it just got even more out of hand as they decided to put in Joe Milton III, and from there, shit hit the fan. At least Jackson Dart can say that he finished off the season on a much higher note, going for 262 total yards and 2 passing touchdowns on 68.8% completion. Tyrone Tracy had 103 yards on the ground on 18 carries, and Gunnar Olszewski, of all people, had an 8-catch, 102-yard game. Wow. The return specialist himself elevating into a number 1 caliber wide receiver right before our very eyes. Dane Belton had 11 tackles. As for the Cowboys, well, we know where they're headed. Why did they finally decide to play Jaden Blue in this game? This is a man who, maybe he'd been dealing with a few injuries in his foot, as I'd mentioned. But, man, when he'd been healthy, they just didn't even give him a lot of reps. You valued Malik Davis over him so much, yet you chose to draft Jaden Blue later on in the draft. It's like, why would you go out and get him if you're not going to utilize his services until fucking garbage time? He actually had a decent day and got himself his first NFL rushing touchdown. Yes, Javonte Williams had a tremendous year, and honestly, I'd expect him to get paid at least a top 15 or so running back, because he played like one this year. I am not delusional enough to say that he's going to get anywhere near the money that Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry are getting on their current contracts, but he should be paid handsomely for what he did this season. Yet Jaden Blue, as a change of pace guy, can offer you a little bit of dynamic play himself, especially out of the backfield. Now, I know you want to have Javonte Williams get a majority of the snaps, but goddamn, show Jaden Blue some love too. Damn, man came from Texas, got drafted to a Texas team, and you ain't gonna utilize his damn services. What the fuck wrong with you? Ryan Flanoy had 5 receptions for 68 yards, and James, one of their linebackers, had 13 tackles and a half sack. All right, moving on to the Browns and the Bengals. The main headline being that Myles Garrett broke the sack record, as he had, from what I've heard from multiple places, his get-off speed to shit off the block and get in the area of Joe Burrow was one of the fastest possible times for any particular split-second motion. In fact, faster was his get-off time than that of one of Usain Bolt's I think get-offs on one of his sprints, as he was in the prime of his career, running through everything as quickly as possible, as the fastest man in the world at the time. That's how quick Myles Garrett got off here. And yet, they are still discrediting it. Even Michael Strahan wanted to take a little shot at him. And I'm like, dude, at that point, hell, Mark Gastineau already said it himself. People could come at you for having Brett Favre literally fall down for you, my nigga. He fell down for you, bro. And you touched him and you got the sack. And you wanted the respect still of having the record to where Gastineau in person at that point of time handed over the ball to you, representing that particular record. And nothing more was made of that from then, aside from his own perspective. Fair enough. So why now, as being a man who was now had this record be tied with TJ Watt, even then I'm sure he probably said something along the lines of, oh, I played in far less games than him, originally when TJ Watt tied the record. But again, records are meant to be broken, and if you can't handle it, bro, just move forward, bro, honestly. Because you can't rain on somebody else's parade like that. You can do all that hate and shit on your own time. But Myles Garrett is most certainly going to do exactly what he wants to do in a season that just hasn't been good for the Browns overall. It's literally been the only thing they've been looking forward to for most of the year. You can't give them that. You can't give them that one thing. You have to open your mouth and say something about that. Come on, man. Not to mention, there's been a metric coming out essentially stating that Myles Garrett has played in about 2 to 300 less snaps. So, if he was a guy who, honestly, with his dominance alone, he's earned the ability to sit out entire reps in games. Just think about that. Knowing that the defense is going to be out on the field consistently with how piss poor the offense is. Or has been for most of the season. But he's earned that with the dominance that he's already established in the league. And he is still that much of a force. Through double and triple teams at times. You saw what the fuck the Steelers did last week. The methods that some of these teams are resorting to just to stop that man from getting to the quarterback. And he still gets to the quarterback at an elite clip with one of the highest, if not still, I think, throughout this season, the highest sack rate per game in NFL history. And they have mentioned as well as watching this nightcap video. Bruce Smith got to 201 sacks in 19 years. As I figured. 201 sacks in 19 years? Myles Garrett is at about 128 in 9 seasons of play. And he is not showing any sign of slowing down. Give that man his respect while he is actively playing. Don't wait to piece it up with the man until he is far removed from his playing career and potentially on TV with you, Michael Strahan. Even J.J. Watt, knowing that TJ is playing for the Steelers and knowing the connection there, understanding what holding that record means. Even J.J. Watt decided to give him love in that situation and give him credit for it. And you can't, because you can't stand to see your own record get demolished. Records are meant to be fucking broken, and some can't be. But no matter how you're feeling, like, bruh, if you have someone who can come forward in their playing career and smash the record, man, they deserve the credit. At the very least, like, damn, my nigga. Even with that in mind, the Browns, despite really not doing much on offense, would take advantage of multiple takeaways for scores, including a Devin Bush interception return for touchdown and a Webb scoop six to ultimately get the advantage on the Bengals at the latter stretch of the game, with Andre Schmidt kicking a 49-yard field goal to give them the 20-18 victory. Like, not a lot of flashy numbers for the Browns here, although Devin Bush, with that pick six, did have 14 tackles as well in a pass deflection. So that's nice to see. But as for the Bengals, Zach Taylor wanted to get salty about it too because the ref stopped the fucking game. That's custom, by the way. You're going to have a stoppage of the game when you have a record broken like that. And the nigga had the nerve to say you're fighting for your lives. Nigga, you're not playing for extended periods of time in January as it is over the last couple seasons. You're fighting for your fucking lives. That could have been an allusion to something as well. But again, save that for tomorrow. Joe Burrow in this game had 236 yards and 3 touchdowns, despite that interception on 74.4% completion. While Chase Brown had 13 rushes for 72 yards. Samaje Perine had 8 rushes for 42 yards. And Jamar Chase had 8 receptions for 96 yards and a touchdown, while T. Higgins had 6 receptions for 67 yards and a score as well. And moving on to the Packers and Vikings. Vikings would win 16-3. Yes, 9 exists, and Max Brosmer also got some play in this game, but they aren't Clayton Tune. They definitely aren't Clayton Tune. If anything, I think this game really comes down to the fact that they, combined, were finally able to get Justin Jefferson a good game. He had 8 receptions for 101 yards And Jordan Mason also had 14 rushes and 94 yards on the ground to lead all rushers in the game overall. They were getting down the field enough and getting in position to make the plays they needed before ultimately having C.J. Ham, of all people, get the only touchdown in this game via the run. But at least they can take that away in this game. Packers as well, like they're sitting people out. They don't really have a chance to do much of anything else. They could be much lower than like the 7 seed. So they don't, again, as I said when talking about the Jordan Love injury here and designation to be out, there was no point of putting them in the game whatsoever. But man, like, who even is this? This is just a disrespect. I understand that Matthew Golden has had a rough season this year. They thought he was going to turn into the number 1, but he's kind of fallen into the bot committee trap as well. Still, in this game, for him to have just a single reception, and on a day where passing wasn't really the wave for the Packers at all, Jacoby Keeney James. I don't even know who that is. I don't even know who that is. He led them with 2 receptions for 15 yards in this game. That's massive disrespect. That's tough, bro. That's tough. The Rams will beat the Cardinals 37-20. What's new? They didn't lose by 20, but, bro, man, Matthew Stafford would have 259 passing yards and 4 touchdowns in this game, along with Puka Nacua getting 10 receptions for 76 in one where he unfortunately mossed the living shit out of the Ohio State man and Denzel Burke. It's okay. It's okay. He's had a good rookie year, and so has Will Johnson, but that is Puka Nacua in a nutshell. There's not much you can do about that. Man. Oh, my gosh. Tyler Higbee would have 5 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. And Colby Parkinson would have 4 receptions for 36 yards and 2 scores. As for the Cardinals themselves, Jacoby Brissett had 243 passing yards and 2 touchdowns with an interception. They didn't run the football enough, and they couldn't really against this front. Michael Wilson had 5 receptions for 99 yards and a touchdown, and Trey McBride had 7 receptions for 65 yards and a score also. All right, moving on to the Dolphins and the Patriots. The Patriots in this game were honestly fighting for the 1 seed. And while they would win, they would not get it. However, this was just truly a game of games. They didn't need Drake May to do much. Still just being as accurate as possible. It was Ramondre Stevenson having an all-around game with 9 touches, 153 yards and 3 scores, including 131 yards on the ground on 18.7 yards per carry. At least Travion Henderson got a pair of touchdowns as well on 53 rushing yards, but damn, like, whoa, what the fuck? Wait a minute. With what he's been going through this season, maybe he needed to have a tune-up game like that to get right for the playoffs. In reality, I mean, over the past couple weeks, you are playing the Jets and Dolphins, but you know what? You'll take that progression from him regardless. Fine. The Dolphins stood no chance. They didn't. Yeah. Like 38-10, bro. Just these damn Jets gone. Get a nigga lost, man. Man, if you think hardcore Ravens fans are losing their minds over them not being a contender for the playoffs, the Jets are already numb to that. But the way that this happens every single season has got to be getting to their heads eventually. Especially when you consider this. Even some of the worst defenses in the NFL this season have been able to get a little lucky, have been able to at times make a quarterback uncomfortable enough to make bad decisions that lead to errant throws, that lead to interceptions. There have been a better defense, obviously, out there that have been able to bait quarterbacks into interceptions through their scheme. But even on the lower end, you've had teams log interceptions with at least one or a few of their guys. And then you have the Jets, who are now the first team in NFL history since interceptions became a stat in the 1933 season to not record a single interception throughout an entire season. And I'm thinking to myself, the way that this defense played last year, in spite of their offense, with a lot of the same people, not all the same people are still there, but with a good portion of the same guys, could not get their hands on one, couldn't luck into one. It is fucking embarrassing. And the fact that, again, Steve Wilks has already been fired at this point. Somebody else got to fucking go. That just cannot happen. Especially in a game where you are unironically playing against a guy in Mitch Trubisky who had been prone to them when he was at the height of his career as a starter. Yet he comes into this game playing for Josh Allen despite him getting his, consecutive start streak maintained by playing just a single snap on the first play of the drive. The man Trubisky, for what will be the Bills' final game of the regular season, or final game in a regular season setting at their current stadium. They have one that they're building in a similar area, right across the street, they say. But they're going to discontinue service at this one whenever their season may end. Nevertheless, final game there. And Mitch Trubisky puts on a fucking show. 259 yards and 4 touchdowns with no picks on 75.9% completion. That Mitch Trubisky did that to your defense, despite not having a single receiver on this damn team crack 50 fucking yards. Not a single one. And they just own this game through and through, because if that wasn't bad enough, Ray Davis had 151 yards on the ground on 21 carries by himself for a team that had 43 rushes for 211 yards. Dude. Jets didn't even come close to that. There's no need for me to talk about them. 35-8, man. Have you no pride? Honestly, it's probably been beaten out of you. The amount of multi-score victories you've given up this season, it wouldn't be surprising. The Broncos would beat a Chargers team that honestly benched most of their guys. They couldn't really fall out of the playoff picture at this point. They were going to be, at least in this scenario, no lower than the 7th seed, because they lost the battle to the Texans last week. And understanding that the Texans won, even with trying to get some of their own guys healthy as well, they couldn't play everybody. So in came Trey Lance. That went about as you would expect. And while they tried to establish a few things later on with Trey Harris III, who would make some pretty good catches that were overturned, unfortunately, that still wouldn't be enough. Somebody said, though, delusionally, that the Broncos were going to hang 38 points on this team. They didn't even score a single offensive touchdown in this game. It was, it was Jaquan McMillan for their defense to get them a pick six for the only touchdown in this game. Everything else is field goals for this Broncos team. When your defense is that dominant, hey, you can get away with that. But let there be a time, even with them having a bye and securing the first seed with this win, man, let them get into a situation where they have to go toe-to-toe with an offense. You trust your defense mightily, understood, but man, if your offense is put into that scenario, they are going to be absolutely tested, man. I'm telling you right now. Because, boy, this is happening against a Chargers team that don't even have their core group of players, man, what the hell do you think you're going to do in a situation where you face off against their full roster? Like, come on, man. And then Commanders Eagles. Josh Johnson would win his second ever start in the NFL to give the Commanders a 24-17 lead late. He ran it in himself. And while the Eagles would try at points to get the game back, they fell short. It's crazy. With this win, they would force the Eagles to move down to the 3 seed, as the Bears held the tiebreaker, given that they beat them to a bloody pulp on Black Friday. Man. Hey, ain't that something? Josh Johnson, had 131 yards and a touchdown along with an interception on 63.6% completion. Their rushers combined for 143 yards on the ground, along with Chris Rodriguez Jr. adding another touchdown to the mix. And Terry McLaurin had 4 receptions for 57 yards. As for the Eagles, Tanner McKee had 241 passing yards along with a touchdown and an interception. Tank Bigsby had 16 rushes for 75 yards and a touchdown. And Devontae Smith had 3 receptions for 52 yards, along with John Dotson putting up 3 receptions for 40 yards. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. also had 12 tackles in this game, along with a tackle for loss. And Jihad Campbell, the rookie, also added 10 tackles, along with a pass deflection in this game. But that'll do it for the game action that I watched. To look into the overall playoff picture, the Broncos and the Seahawks, respectively, for the AFC and the NFC, hold the 1 seeds, have byes. The Super Bowl runs through the Broncos in Denver, and the Super Bowl runs through Seattle, with the Seahawks playing at home in Lumen. As for the other games here, I believe that they stated, with the scheduling here, the Panthers will face off against the Rams first on Saturday. Then you have the Packers at the 7 seed facing off against the 2-seeded Bears for the nightcap there. On Sunday, you have an interesting one, as there is significance here with the Bills at the 6 seed facing off against the 3-seeded Jaguars red hot. And hey, if you remember, the Bills in 2017, by magic, by pure luck, got into the playoffs, faced off against this Jaguars team in the wild card. And the Jaguars won that game in an absolute slugfest. It was like 10-9 in that game. So, I mean, it's like there's some history there. The Bills might want a little revenge. But at the same time, if the Jaguars defense has been playing this good and they can keep it consistent against an overall team like that, who is limited, aside from potentially imposing their will on the run game with James Cook III, hey, that could be dangerous. That could be dangerous. So you can't count them out. For that afternoon game, the 6-seeded 49ers will face off against the 3-seeded Eagles. And to cap it off on Sunday Night Football, the 7-seeded Chargers will face off against the 2-seeded Patriots. Then on Monday, you will have the 4-seeded Steelers face off against the 5-seeded Texans. On Monday Night Football, I think they mentioned it was the first ever playoff Monday Night Football game. So that could be interesting. And again, not to get into a full prediction thing, I'm not trying to project anything. But yes, the Steelers, taking it all the way back to the Dolphins game that they had on Monday Night Football, they are one of the most prolific teams on Monday Night Football still. They're playing that game at home where they have consistently won on Monday Night Football. But the Texans defense could give them a challenge, although they are getting DK Metcalf back. There's a lot to take in with every single one of these games. And although I ain't going to project much, what I can say is that, aside from chaotic division finishes from the AFC North and the NFC South, these playoffs could be very intriguing. You are truly getting the best of the best against each other in most of these games, to where teams that are 11-6 in years past, probably would have been higher up in terms of seeding. Only a 7 seed? Like, it's crazy. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.